Please chant with me. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Next, we are going to recollect the qualities of the Buddha. So I have shared the screen with everybody. Buddha Anusati, recollection on the Buddha. I hope everybody can see. Yes?
Yes, Bhante,
Okay.
we can see.
Okay, so let's chant together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Ananta vittara gunam gunato nusarang muning bhaveya buddhima bhikkhu buddhanusati madito. A wise monk meditates on the Buddha's infinite and pervasive virtues as his first contemplation. He practices Buddhanusati savasane kileseso eko sabbe nighatiya aho susuddha santano pujanancha sadaraho. The Buddha destroyed all defilements by himself. He had an extremely pure mind, being worthy of offerings from the whole world. Sabbakala gate dhammi sabbe sammasayang muni sabbakarena buddhitva eko sabbanyutang gato. The Buddha has rightly realized everything in the world relating to all times through his great insight, and has attained supreme enlightenment entirely through his own efforts. Vipassana vijjai siladi charane cha susamidhe sampanno gagana behinayako. The leader, the Buddha, has various knowledges such as vipassana, as extensive as the sky, and he has perfect conduct and pure virtue. Sammagato subhangthanam amogha vachano chaso tividhassa pilokassa jnata niravasesato. The Buddha has rightly gone to the most blissful state. His speech is very meaningful. He has understood the three worlds, sensual form and formless worlds, in their entirety. Aneke gunoge Sabba sattuttamo ahu aneke upayehi naradhamme dhamme sicha. The Buddha has become supreme among all beings by his manifold qualities. Using various strategies, he tamed gods and humans who could be tamed. Eko sabbasa lokassa sabbathanusasako bhagyaisariyadinam gunanam paramo nidhi. The Buddha is the great teacher of all beings, the unique instructor to the entire world. He is a noble treasure of qualities such as good fortune and prosperity. Panyasa sabba dhammesu karuna sabba jantasu attathanam parattanam sadhika gunajetthika. The Buddha had perfect wisdom. His compassion extended to all beings. He acted for the benefit of himself and others. He is supreme in all qualities. Dayaya parami chitva panyayatana muddhari uddhari sabba dhamme cha dayayanye cha uddhari. The Buddha crossed over suffering by the highest wisdom gained through the perfections and great compassion by realizing the truth. The Buddha helped others to cross over suffering through his great compassion. Dissamano pitavassa Rupakayo achintiyo asadharana jnanadhe dhammakaye kathavakati. The beauty of his physical body, full of meritorious marks, is unimaginable even when visible. How much more unimaginable is his body of Dhamma with unique wisdom. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, dear Dhamma friends, now we are going to practice some Vipassana meditation to understand the true nature of conditioned things. Are you ready? Okay, sit comfortably and with a happy mind. Let's start investigating the true nature of consciousness. Since we finished developing insight with regard to the first four groups of clinging, we finished investigating as meditation. We finished form group of clinging, feeling group of clinging, perception group of clinging, formations group of clinging. So today we are going to investigate the true nature of consciousness group of clinging. Listen to me and investigate at the same time the true nature of consciousness. As Buddha realized, there are 6 classes of consciousness: Vijnana, dependent on eye and visual object. Eye consciousness arises. Chakku Vijnana. The eye is impermanent and subject to change. Visual object is also impermanent and subject to change. Therefore, the consciousness which arises dependent on eye and visual object is certainly impermanent and subject to change. Consciousness means the cognizing. It cognizes the visual object. Buddha realized this consciousness is like a magician. When we see something, it's like a magical illusion. We see impermanent things as permanent. We see painful things as happy things. We see selfless things as things with the self. We see impure things as pure. This is the magical illusion of consciousness. The true nature of consciousness needs to be fully realized in order to end suffering. The second one is ear consciousness. Dependent on ear and sound, ear consciousness arises. Sota Vijnana. Since ear is impermanent and sound is impermanent, ear consciousness is also impermanent and subject to change. Dependent on nose and smell, nose consciousness arises. Ghana Vijnana. Since the nose is impermanent and smell is impermanent, nose consciousness is also impermanent and subject to change. Dependent on tongue and taste, tongue consciousness arises. When we put something on the tongue, it is the consciousness that recognizes it. It recognizes bitter as bitter, sweet as sweet, salty as salty. Since the tongue is impermanent and taste is impermanent, tongue consciousness is also impermanent, subject to change. Dependent on body and tangible or touch. Body consciousness arises. Kaya vijnana. Since the body is impermanent and the tangible is impermanent, body consciousness is also impermanent, subject to change. Dependent on mind and thought. Mind consciousness arises. Mano vijnana. Since the mind is impermanent, thought is impermanent, mind consciousness is also impermanent, subject to change. Consciousness is impermanent. Impermanent. Consciousness is subject to change. Subject to change. As Buddha realized, the consciousness is conditioned by mentality and materiality. Nama rupa paccaya vijnana. When the consciousness cognizes an object, it can do that because the consciousness is made of mentality and materiality. There is this material element, the physical nature of things, and also the mental elements, which is feeling, perception, volitions, contact, and attention. These are the mental factors behind the consciousness. Dependent on mentality and materiality, consciousness arises. This materiality element is impermanent. Mentality element is impermanent. Therefore, consciousness is also impermanent. With the cessation of mentality and materiality, nama rupa, consciousness ceases. Whether we like or not, the consciousness changes and ceases. That is why we cannot cognize only what we like. Consciousness doesn't act according to our wish or our likes. Consciousness arises due to causes and conditions. The consciousness which arose in the past arose due to mentality and materiality. Therefore, all the past consciousness is impermanent. 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 All the past consciousness is subject to change. All the consciousness which arose in the past is not mine, not I am, not myself. The consciousness that will arise in future will arise dependent on mentality and materiality. When the causes change, the consciousness will change. So the future consciousness is impermanent. Impermanent. Subject to change. Not mine, not I am, not myself. Consciousness that has arisen at present has arisen dependent on mentality and materiality. With the cessation of mentality and materiality, consciousness ceases. The consciousness that has arisen at present is impermanent. Impermanent. Subject to change. Not mine. Not I am. Not myself. Internal consciousness is impermanent. subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. External consciousness is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. Gross consciousness is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. Subtle consciousness is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. Inferior consciousness is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. Superior consciousness is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. Consciousness that arises far away is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. Consciousness that arises near is impermanent, subject to change, not mine, not I am, not myself. The supporting factor for the consciousness is craving, Khandha. Craving is like moisture. Consciousness is like the seed. And Buddha saw that when there is craving for visual objects, craving for sounds, craving for odors, craving for tastes, craving for tangibles, And craving for thoughts. When there is craving, consciousness grows. Karma is like the field. So the rebirth means we have consciousness as the seed, karma as the field, craving as the moisture. That is how this continuous existence come about. However, this consciousness is impermanent. There is no permanent consciousness. Consciousness is impermanent. Impermanent. Subject to change. We need to be mindful that the things the consciousness shows us is not permanent. They are impermanent. The consciousness shows us painful things as happy things. The consciousness shows us impure things as pure things. The consciousness shows us ugly things as beautiful things. It's like a magical illusion. It is not the truth we see. It's not the truth we hear. It's not the truth we smell. It's not the truth we taste. It's not the truth we touch. It's not the truth we think. It is a magical illusion. Wise people should understand this illusion and break through to the truth. Once the consciousness is fully understood, they will recognize impermanent things as impermanent, painful things as painful, ugly things as ugly, selfless things as selfless. It's like the magician can no longer play the tricks. Consciousness is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Eye consciousness is impermanent, impermanent. Subject to change. Ear consciousness is impermanent, subject to change. Nose consciousness is impermanent, subject to change. Tongue consciousness is impermanent, subject to change. Body consciousness is impermanent, subject to change. Mind consciousness is impermanent, subject to change. Slowly and gradually stop your meditation. Slowly and gradually stop your meditation. Rejoicing in the powerful good karma of Vipassana meditation and sharing merit with all beings. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.